Okay, welcome everybody to our episode of Three Mystics at a Round Table. And today's discussion at the round table is the mystical experience. And I kind of don't have an agenda going into this, but when I was thinking about it, and by the way, thank you, Sally, and thank you, Gary, for being with us from Soul Explorers podcast as usual. And everybody go sign up for their podcast on YouTube, and there's other places, but you'll find it. Spirit will lead you. But the mystical experience has been something that I've really been interested in my own spiritual journey. And that is how my whole spiritual journey started because of a mystical experience. And one that I didn't make happen or it came to me. I was seeking, but they happen on their own. And I don't know if you guys have noticed that. But I think let's start first. Each of you give your definition of what do you think a mystical experience is, and how does that differ from, hearing from a loved one or that kind of thing. So who would like to jump in first?
Okay.
Gary, your turn. Your turn. Yeah.
I think mystical experiences are signposts along the way. They're not an end point. And often people think, well, when I have that mystical experience, I've arrived. There's no arriving. I have to tell you, it's ongoing. Um, but they're clarifying. They are a leap in your individual consciousness. Um, and they're beautiful experiences. I remember one when I was young. I had been at a friend's house and I stepped outside and everything looked different. Everything had a clarity I had never seen before. And it wasn't until years later I realized that was a mystical experience. That experience has stayed with me from the age of 8 to now, because it was so profound. But it was a turning point. And and you'll have hopefully, especially if you're doing spiritual work, you'll have several of those in your life. But they're profound and they're energizing, and it's the universe letting you know you're on the right path.
Yeah, I like that. It's almost like pointing you in a direction. You're asking for that help and it points you in the direction you need to go, um, that maybe you wouldn't have ever thought of. Do you know what I mean? Just my thought. Go ahead, Sally. What's your
Well,
idea?
and that's a good question because I was also asking myself this before we got together today, because I think it's important to define what it can be, what a lot of people do experience, including myself, and the boundary between a mystical experience and other forms of spiritual experiences can be kind of fuzzy, because they can kind of overlap to some degree. Um, but I have found for me, they tend to be a sense of merging. And by that, I mean it can be merging with another individual, and similar to, but not the same as kind of can happen in mediumship. It's often more unexpected and very visceral, I find. A lot of people, a lot of mystics talk about that sense of unity with the all that is, so a lot of people will have mystical experiences using things like psychedelics or that sort of thing. I've never done that, but I've had what I would call maybe baby mystical experiences in that direction. I've had them in nature. I've had them in dreams. I've had them in meditation. And I've had them when I wasn't even expecting them coming and wasn't doing anything to help promote them, you
Mm.
know? So there is an ineffable quality to them. And that may be a very defining word for a mystical experience, is that sometimes there's just no words to describe it, but you know it when you have it.
Yeah, and I think too, they're ahas. Ah,
Yeah.
didn't know that could
Yes.
happen or didn't see that. So it's almost like if you want to call it God, universe, divine spirit, whatever your term is for that loving, divine loving presence in your life, it engages with you rather than, and perhaps they happen because of the seeker. There is some sort of seeking to engage with that. And we've talked about this in past episodes about how losing a loved one is a jumping off point to look for more or to engage more, with that unseen realm. Go ahead, Gary. You're muted.
Oh,
Edit point. Okay. I was just going to say, Spirit just gave me, you can't force mystical experiences. You'll never have them if you're trying to force it. It has to be an allowance. And that just came through to me really clearly that you can do the work, the preparation, lay the groundwork for a mystical experience, but don't try and force it because that will thwart it, I think.
Right. Go ahead,
so
Sal.
that leads me to a question for you, Susan. Like, could you mind if I ask you a question?
Oh, go for it.
We've titled this The Three Mystics. What does it mean to you to be a mystic?
Oh, that's a really good question because I think it's a mystic. We are living in the age of the mystic. I think we've evolved out of the patriarchal one God, you know, concept, which a lot of the religions are based on. There's one God, and this is the form in which I follow God, and there's different religions, but the mystic is one who comes to experience the divine and comes to understand there's only God and God exists in all things. And so we've moved out of, and I'm getting God bumps. We've moved out of that. Well, there's one God and the separateness of everything to recognize that the divine exists in all things. And when you open up to that belief, or I wouldn't say belief, that experience, because it's a knowing, not a belief, whereas we're coming out of beliefs into knowing because of the mystical experience. Does that make sense? And so, which is the transformative part. So that's what I believe a mystic is, one who has experienced that connection with the divine and recognizes it is within me and it is also within everything else. And when you start looking for it, you see it everywhere.
I would agree.
And I think also belief is a stepping stone on the way to knowing. So don't think, oh, I have to toss out all my beliefs. No, work with them. They're a tool, but ultimately it will transform to knowing because you'll have enough experiences and see enough that it's no longer a belief. Belief also implies doubt.
Right.
Right, but people do have mystical experiences within all kinds of belief systems, right? So there we get our Rumis and our Saint Teresa's and Buddhist monks who regularly experience amazing senses of unity and oneness as well. And so all of these cultures have also shared with us their mystical experiences. And of course, that's where the sweet spot is, right? That's where the overlap in all of the belief systems occur, is within the mystical experience.
Yeah, and I think the mystical experience comes to the person in perhaps the comfort zone of the belief system they came out of, because I've had a lot of experiences with Mother Mary and Jesus, but I haven't had with Buddha or Kuan Yin or those kind of things. And other people have, you know what I mean? And it doesn't mean that they're any less than what my experience is. It's they came out of a different belief system, and that belief system is still archetypes of the same only God expressing itself in many different forms, you know. So yeah, I totally get that. And I appreciate what you said, Gary, about the fact that beliefs are not wrong. Religion, I mean, because you can find God in the midst of religion. All right. You can have experiences, mystical experience inside a belief system, but also those experiences can shift your perception, you know what I mean? So that you open wider to this whole concept that there's only God and God exists in all things. And that means also within you and within me, that there is only God, and God can be experienced in many different, whether it's nature or portals or, you know, whatever, there is that presence. But how does, here's the next question, unless anybody else has anything to say.
Well, I would just say too, whatever that source is, call it God.
Mhm.
If you have a, if you think you can describe what that is, then you don't know what it is because the human brain cannot formulate a description of the infinite invisible.
Mhm.
And I love that name for God, the infinite invisible, because you cannot form a concept around that.
Right, right. I agree with that. You can't, I don't think our words or what we experience can explain what that is. It's more, you can feel what it is, but you can't give it words,
Right.
you know. And again, that goes down to the experience that is the teacher, that becomes the teacher, you know, and at least in my, but, you know, if God exists in all things, then who's to say that, you know, because I was kind of separating the two, that perhaps connections with our loved ones is different than connection, but aren't they divine as well? They may not be fully, you know, in their divine essence, they're still evolving and growing, but God still exists within them. And the universe, God, divine spirit uses them as a aha that takes you further down the road. So, yeah, I don't know.
That's that fuzzy boundary that I
It's
was
fuzzy
talking about
boundary.
earlier.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a fuzzy boundary because it might be an experience of an individual.
Mhm.
And I know you said you had a question, but I actually have a question too, which I'll add my 2 cents for. So, what mystical experiences have you had that, I mean, and I assume we've all had well more than one, but you know, what are one or two that gave you that aha, that gave you that sense of unity and connection, maybe with a fuzzy boundary that you can tell?
Do you want to go first, Gary?
Well, I would just say boundaries are a human concept.
Mhm.
There are gradations, I would say, but not boundaries. You know, on the other side, I've heard it said more than once that we don't really have boundaries like you have boundaries on the planet. There are different spheres of understanding and development in the soul, but not clear-cut definitive boundaries. And what was the rest of the question? Am I missing?
Oh, well, just what experience can you tell the story of an experience that you've had that you felt was a truly mystical experience?
Out-of-body experiences for me were certainly probably one of the biggest ones, which we talked about on the last episode. And I don't remember what I said then, so I don't want to repeat myself. But they were real eye-openers because I found myself running around wanting to tell everybody about it, and people were giving me that sideways, glazed over look. And I realized, oh, you have to be discerning with this information when you receive it because it, even though it was very true and real in my experience, it may not be in the person you're telling. It may not be a reality for them. And that's okay. So we have to be discerning and gentle. with people. So I
Did
hope
you
that.
learn from that experience? What was the aha? I One, there's life after death when you explain, that you ran into this gal who had died. Would another be, I am not a body? Was
Yes.
something that consciously,
Yeah. I have a body, but I'm not the body. Yes.
and that's a
Uh,
biggie.
oh, huge. That is a huge mystical experience
Mhm.
to come to that realization. I,
Mhm.
I think and many people totally identify with the body. I mean, many people on our planet just totally identify with that, and it keeps them stuck in a sort of revolving door.
Right. I mean, it's reminds me of, that whole concept that it is our consciousness looking out of our eyes, that's residing in the body, that these are just earth suits. And then that out of body experience absolutely teaches that lesson that I am not my body. I am pure consciousness. So that would be the big lesson I think you learned, correct?
Hmm. Hmm. Oh, absolutely. And it was out of body experiences and that experience when I was young. And I'm sure there are others that I'm just not pulling up right now. But that experience when I was young was a unitive experience. Everything I was looking at was me, and I was it.
Mm-hmm. There is only God, and God exists in all things.
That's it. And I was 8 years old.
Mm.
But yet that is, I can remember exactly where I was standing, exactly what I was looking at, to this day, some 60 some years later. So,
Very cool. Yeah, for me, I would say my most definitive one, and I may have shared this in the interview with you guys, was when I was driving down the road in my little minivan, and my husband was going to buy this business. Did I share you this little newspaper?
I, I,
And I'm bawling. I'm because I had asked. This is after I'd asked God to become my teacher, the Holy Spirit. I wanted to know if God was real. So I sort of took a different path into this. It wasn't about, or what's the afterlife. I didn't come in it to it that way. I came in it to it. I was miserable and I invited God to be my teacher. And I'm driving home after work or something, just bawling my eyes out. God, please don't let this happen. I don't want this business. I'll end up running it. It's just going to be a mess. And I hear this audible, booming male voice that says, "Do not be afraid. I will be with you." And I flip around to see who was in the car. It was that visceral and real. And then it said it again: "Do not be afraid. I will be with you." And this peace melted over me. I didn't want to go in a direction that I was being led because I was afraid of it. And it took that mystical experience intervention to help me let go and be okay, which was a defining moment in my life because had that not happened, I wouldn't be here today, doing what I'm doing had that not happened. But that was my first, I wouldn't say it was more my second. The first one was just a little bit quieter, you know what I mean? Because I was going to Bible study, I really went into this whole spiritual thing. And of course, I did it in the framework that I knew to go into. And I was sitting there talking to my teacher about my miserable marriage and how I wanted my husband, to change and heal our marriage. And I hear this voice in my head, not the audible voice, but I hear it in my head that says, "You've got to go on your journey whether he goes or not,"
Mhm.
which I was able to let go of trying to save him, of trying to get him to see what I was seeing, to be what I was being, and that I had to go whether he went or not, because I couldn't make that choice for him. But at the time, I believed in miracles and prayers and God would heal this marriage but it wasn't, that voice said, "No, you go on whether he goes or not," you know. So that was the first one. The second one was driving down the road and hearing that audible voice, which made me realize that would be my really biggest mystical experience. That was life changing. I surrendered to where life was taking me rather than resisting it. How about you, Sally?
Well, I'm sitting here looking at the picture of Jesus behind you, and probably my most early mystical experiences were with the man that we call Jesus. I tend to call him Yeshua now, which I think is more accurate version of his name. And it was certainly within the context of what I was raised with, but I had sort of repeating lucid dreams in which he appeared. And every single time, the just immensity of the love that I felt was overwhelming, to the point that tended to knock me out of the lucid dream, and wake me up in tears, so I felt it very emotionally as well. And it's funny because as in much later years, as I began to develop mediumship, I felt that presence again. And it was exactly the same, overwhelming. And this was in a mediumistic sort of way. And to the point where I found myself asking him to please step back. It was just a little too much. I couldn't take the amount of love that was filling my body. And so I kind of consider my experiences baby mystic experiences, because they tend to have dealt more with either energy or what I considered an individuated being. And in that case, it was Yeshua. But I also remember as a kid sitting in church, and they would, on the first Sundays of the month, if there were any newborn babies, they would bless those babies. And as part of that ritual, that process, they would invoke the presence of the Holy Ghost. And I kid you not, every time that happened, I felt a wall of energy come from behind me and pass through me to the front of the chapel. And I would perk up and look around and go, why is nobody responding to this? It was a visceral, palpable feeling. And it seemed like I was the only one noticing it, because everybody else was just sitting there quietly and normally. I don't know if that was the case. I hope there were other people who maybe periodically were sensitive to that energy. So within the context of, where I was raised and what I was raised in belief system wise, I still had mystical experiences. So what were you going to say, Gary? You had something to say.
I was just going to add, that's due to frequency. You were in a receptive frequency to experience it. It doesn't mean it didn't have an effect on others on some
Right,
level.
but I felt it.
You were
It was
in
a
alignment
palpable thing.
with the frequency to feel that. And
Yeah.
I truly feel that's true.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so, which leads us to another interesting thought with the mystical experience, because there's a lot of people that within the church or a religion have had mystical experiences, but it binds them more to the religion than it does set them free from, which I guess is their experience or what they need to experience. Because I always call religion spiritual kindergarten. I think a lot of times going to church and growing up in a religion teaches us a love for God, and it starts the seeking, but we can also get stuck in the belief systems that maybe don't necessarily align with divinity. Do you know what I mean? Or our man's belief systems that we have to move beyond. And the mystical experience moves us out to think broader or go beyond the no trespassing sign,
Right. That's why I would consider my dark night of the soul another mystical experience.
Hey folks, thanks for listening to our Three Mystics at a Roundtable discussion. The Casa de Santa Maria takes pride in our spiritual but not religious approach to our soul's growth journey. So after listening, please take time to visit our casadesantamaria.org website and register for our free e-newsletter. When you do, we'll send you 5 of our spiritually focused ebooks absolutely free. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with others who are interested in their spiritual journey. This will help us heal the world one heart at a time. Now back to the roundtable and enjoy.
Mhm.
Because it was that turning point that I needed to become more open to the possibilities of what reality was, and where my place was in the universe, and then the actual search to experience what was possible to be experienced.
Right.
And I think for a lot of people, that dark night of the soul is such a critical point, and we can look at that itself as mystical in nature.
Right. Exactly. Because I think that's the turning point in the journey where you look at this crumpled, broken mess within and choose to wrap your arms around that and say, I will love even you, even this broken mess. Do you know what I mean? And that's the unconditional love I think we're all looking for, to be honest, is that loving the self first. I could see a whole podcast. I could see another discussion on Dark Nights of the Soul if you guys are up for that one, on the next round. I think that would be really good. Um, what I'm also thinking is, oftentimes these divine beings as mystical experiences, because I too had a dream of Jesus. I can't remember, again, I can't remember if I shared this or not. But I was given my mission in that dream. And the whole story of Jesus walking on the water and the waves going has sort of been a theme in my life of, where the storms are flowing and Jesus reaches out his hand and says, come, and you get out of the boat, the safety of the boat, and you do something unexpected. Well, that's symbolic of getting out of the safety of religion or safe, whatever you're holding on to make you safe, and walking on the water towards something that you want to engage with. So that theme has been sort of a theme in my own journey. But in my dream, I was in the ocean and the waves are going, and this hand pulls me up out of the ocean. I'm standing on the shore. Can't remember if I shared this story. And there's standing Jesus. And he had pulled me up out of this storm, and I'm standing on the shore with him. It was beautiful then. And I just looked at him, and you think you want to ask him all these questions, and I couldn't think of anything. And all I could say was, how beautiful. And it was his energy that was just, I couldn't ask him questions. I couldn't, just how beautiful. And then all of a sudden I was standing in the spotlight. It was dark all around me. And I'm just standing, and I knew it was the light of the divine shining on me. And this little heavyset girl in a tutu danced through my light. And then this bitchy, grumpy old lady just a curse and walks through my light, with this, as I'm standing there. And then it hit me and go, oh, you want me to love these people?
Mhm.
And that was how my mission in life came, to love the unlovable, to see their divinity, whether they see it for them or not. And so I would consider that probably a major mystical experience, because I was given my divine mission. My divine mission was go out and create a casa. Do you know what I mean? It was love these people, the ones that can't see their own divinity, So that was pretty a defining moment in my own journey.
Susan, I think what you just said, your description of the walking on water, that that's the best I've ever heard, the best analogy for what that story teaches us, that I think I've ever heard. So thank you for that.
Well, it just came to me, so you know. But it's been a theme in my life of getting out of the safety of things, and how many times in our own journey have we had to let go of the safety of something
Mhm.
and put that leap of faith into, even though it looks like there's a storm, can we do this? And climbing out of that boat and letting go of the fear. Yeah, I don't know.
It
I
can be done.
several. I can think of several in my own journey, Um, even doing the casa, you know, even we don't have any money, we can't do this, and yet here we are, following or listening, if you know what I mean. So what does that bring up for you guys?
Go ahead, Sally.
Oh, well, probably what I'm doing right now in that we're going to go back to that big life-changing dark night of the soul time frame. I could not have known in the moment where it would lead me. I could not have had any idea that I would be sitting here with beautiful people having these amazing conversations and spending all of my energy helping other people to see their own abilities and their own divinity and their own connection to not only their loved ones, although that really is a big focus for me, but also to the divine and all that is that you were talking about. And I just, the fact that these things are experiential and anybody can have them is just something I want to shout from the rooftops, because I don't think that I'm unique. I was about to say special. Special is not the right word. I don't think I'm unique in that I am a fairly average person with a fairly, basic, uh, Caucasian girl born in the United States kind of a background, upbringing. Um, I'm a little more mentally focused than maybe I would like to be sometimes. But none of it has prevented me from being able to experience things that create a sense of awe and wonder. And I would love for other people to also know that they're capable of experiences of awe and wonder.
That's perfect. And I think that can go into our definition of a mystical experience because it does create awe and wonder of how can that happen? That's never happened before. That's never, but I think it always is something that I think A Course in Miracles calls it, a miracle is nothing more than a change in perception.
Right.
And, we often define miracles as, something that happens to us physically or, a healing but a miracle is nothing more than a change in perception, which I think then can bring about the healing in the body and that kind of thing. And these mystical experiences put something in us that says, oh, wow, I didn't know that could happen. Awe and wonder. How did that happen? Why did that happen? You know, because at least for me, you can't make any of these things happen. You can't sit there and think, and which is sort of in some ways hard for some people because they want that experience so bad, and then it doesn't happen.
Well, and like you said, you can't make them happen, but you can allow them to happen. And
Perfect.
that's the critical difference.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings in the theme that I've been focused on recently. You can't think them alone. It's not just an act of positive thinking. It's a marriage of the heart and the mind. that brings things into your experience. The things are already there. We call them in by who we are. We have to vibrate, if I can use that term, in that frequency that allows, as Sally said, allowing. But you can't force it, and you can't. And we are so trained in our society to think that the mental capacity is the all and everything. It's not. It's part of, but not the all.
Right. I really like
That-
what you said something. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that brought up a little bit that was a little channeled bit of wisdom that was given to me just within the last couple of days. And I wrote it down. I don't have the little book with me that I wrote it down, but it had to do exactly with that, Gary, with not rejecting one piece of yourself for the other, that we are multi-layered individuals. Ooh, I've got chills. um, and that you have to blend the mental with the spiritual, with the emotional, and honor all those pieces of yourself in order to be a whole person, in order to have full function of all the capacities that you were born with. So anyway, sorry, that just brought up a
No,
little bit
no,
of
whenever,
channeled information.
you know, what you said, Gary, I think is really important because I think the heart is the key, or awakening the heart is the key, because that's what happened to me. I I asked for an experience of divine love, which to me, the only two prayers you have to ever ask is, let me experience divine love and teach me to love me, or bring me to peace and show me what divine love is. We have such a tendency to pray for the outer experience, or, fix this problem or nothing. And really what is going on, it's all about here. But what awakened my abilities was that I had an experience of divine love. And it opened my heart in a way that blew open this connection. Do you know what I mean? And I think that is the difference. We talk about the chakra system, and that's a whole nother discussion, but that heart, if it's not open, you're living in that third dimensional world of the lower, material world and that kind of thing. When you open the heart, it connects you with that unseen world, those experiences, and it's all about the heart, at least in my experience. That's what I experienced, was once you encounter divine love, in whether in a mystical way or whatever, it blows open the heart. And then that opens everything out so that you can have that connection with the divine and everything else along the way. In my experience.
I would add the head, the brain, the thought is the intention, but the heart is the activator. Ooh, that just came to me. Love that.
I love that too. That's really great, because I agree. We are in that mental world, and I think there's the coherence of head and heart at the same time. And I think that the head is, when the heart is not open, the head leads. But there has to be a dance between the two, because as Spirit always said, the ego is necessary.
Oh yeah.
Or nothing would ever get done down here. So it's really, but I think the heart is, and that's why our work, Milton and I's work, is about helping people awaken the heart. Because once you awaken the heart, and I think this goes back to this whole concept of the struggle with, there's lack of unconditional love in the world, why I get so upset about it. Why do you have to kill other people, and that kind of thing? Because I understand that that's the key, is awakening that heart, because that's where the wisdom of the divine flows through in the heart to the head. So you have that aha moment, both of you, of the intent, and what did you call it? The intent and the
What did I say?
Activator.
Activator.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's true in prayer too. The intention and the activator.
Mhm.
But if it's only the intention, nothing much is going to happen. And we've never been taught that. I think it's kind of been hidden from us until this era because now there's just tons of information and you can look at it scientifically with quantum physics, how this works. You can go down that rabbit hole, but it's fascinating if you have the time and desire to explore that. But that's what the great traditions and the great mystics of all time have been telling us. And, even hearing it, you can miss it. You have to incorporate it. You have to really hear it on a level that makes you go, oh, yeah, how did I miss that? Because I've tried to bring positive situations that only using my mind and nothing changes. But the heart is the activator. Ooh, I'm going to copyright that.
Yeah, you should. You should. The heart is active. But I think what is important is the clearing the unhealed things held within the heart
Yes.
is such an important part of the spiritual journey so that it can awaken even further, which I think is this, many people say the heart is the seat of the soul, or that's your access to the divine, because, if the divine is pure love, you know what I mean, in the heart, you can't intellectually feel it in your head. It's a feeling. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes.
Or an
It all
energy.
comes, yes, it all comes down to whether or not you learn to love yourself as well.
Mhm.
Because if you're so critical and hard on yourself that you can't love yourself, how are you ever going to learn to love other people fully? How are you going to learn to love the divine fully if you don't love yourself the way the divine loves you? And, I always say to people, self-love is not selfish. Those are two entirely different concepts. But I see the vast majority of our problems as a species right now being a still very dominant sense of, maybe self-loathing is not quite the right word, but just a lack of self-love and a lack of the ability to recognize our own divinity and claim to love ourselves in the way that, people of religions claim that they love God or they love Jesus, or whatever deity they aspire to show devotion to. But if we're part and parcel of that, to hate ourselves is to hate the all that is.
Right.
And so finding that is important.
Yeah, that reminds me of, that passage in the Bible of First Corinthians 13, what love is. Love is patient, love is kind. And when it gets to the point where without love, it means nothing. And we spin our wheels, and it's such an important part of the spiritual journey is encountering that divine love, which is a mystical experience, by the way. But also what you were saying, Sally, remind me of the fact that there, and Gary, the intention, there is an invitation that takes place where we go, is this real or not? Is there a God out there that parted the Red Sea? Is there the burning bush? Is that real? You know, and that intention activates the experience. Go ahead, Gary, what you're going to say.
Oh, the only thing I would add is when we talk about love, unfortunately, there's a percentage of people that don't really know what that is until it's experienced as a love that is all encompassing.
Mhm.
That includes everything, birds, trees, people you don't like, you can still love. You don't have to be around them, but you can love them. So understanding a greater love than how we generally use that word in our society. Like, it's usually I love you, you love me, and so we're gonna, be this couple or whatever. That's part of it, but it's so much bigger than that. That's an aspect of love. Um, so I wanted to clarify a little about love, and words really fall short to do that. It has to be experienced.
Yeah, and that's why my prayer I tell people pray, I want to experience divine love. Show me how to love me. Let me experience that divine love, because that is the transformative, and of course, religion is, I think, man's way of looking for God. And spirituality or mysticism is about inviting that divinity to come look for you or to come find you. You know, it's a different way, of saying, I can't find my way out of a paper bag. God, would you show me the way? And the mystical experience is the showing the way. And it's an invitation.
Yes.
It's an invitation.
So maybe that's where religions are falling short. They're almost all based in some individual's mystical experience. So in the case of Christianity, it's the mystical experience of Christ. In the case of Islam, it's, Muhammad, whatever it happens to be. They're generally based in some individual's mystical experience. And so people try to either worship that individual as if they then are also, which I would claim they, of course, they are God, because so are we. But they then start to worship that individual, or they just tell the stories over and over and over of that mystical experience rather than pursuing their own.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the big blocks there is the not feeling worthy of that I'm not worthy enough. I'm not good enough. Right. And of course, our religions teach us we're not good enough. We fall short. We'll never measure up to God. We'll never.
We're sinners.
We're sinners.
Which is, and that's why self-love is critical to the process.
Right.
And anything like that we're told over and over again creates a pattern in us that we keep falling back to. If we think we're born in sin, and all the communications I hear from the other side say that's hogwash. So I think the problem is that most religions, though they served a purpose, and you were talking about the burning bush and the walking away, whether or not they actually happened physically, they're teaching tools. So you have to kind of look at it like, what's the real message behind this? What's the real intent that they're trying to convey with these messages? And maybe they did happen. I don't know. But so yeah, that's all.
Yeah, it's a real struggle getting out of those childhood religious teachings,
Conditioning.
Yeah. I remember, well into my spiritual journey, and Milton and I were living in Sedona, and I was reading A Course in Miracles, and I heard Jesus' voice say to me, Susan, you are not sin. You never have been. You never will be. You only thought you were.
Right.
And that was a definitive mystical experience that shifted me out of that I will never measure up to be someone that, can have, great experiences and be a teacher or whatever. It was just like a really definitive. And it was just a really great thing that shifted me out of that whole religious belief that sin was an illusion.
Yeah. I love that first opening phrase of the Course, because the Course in Miracles, because religions don't teach us this. Mm-hmm. Because they've become crystallized, solidified in a belief system with dogma. But nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. that is a profound statement when you sit with it.
Very much
So,
so.
and
Yeah,
that is the ending of fear when you can grok that, you
right.
know, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists.
And the belief is only in your mind, you know. And again, a miracle is nothing more than a change in perception. And that's what
That's
the
it.
mystical experience does. And I think we've covered a lot of the gamut of how do we get to those mystical experience? We work on ourselves. We make that invitation to spirit to say, come in and clean me out so I can experience the divinity that lives within me, the divinity that I am, the I am that I am, you know, and let me express that in the world. Go ahead, Sally.
But yeah, one of the most common things I hear from people when they say, I never have these kind of experiences, I can't do it, I'm not, they say, I am not able. Well, in that statement, they're creating that exact condition because we are all capable. It usually means there's a level of surrender they haven't quite gotten to yet. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's totally fine. But it just means there's more to do with letting go of who and what they think they are so that they can become more aware of who and what they really are.
Yeah,
Which
and
is a
not
part of
chase the
divine.
experience, chase the transformation.
Yes.
That's my 2 cents of the day is don't chase the
I love
experience,
it.
chase the inner transformation that we invite into us, that we say, I don't know how to get there. I can't figure out how or where I'm supposed to be going. God, can you come fix this? And then let it go. Surrender.
Because on our own, we can't figure out how to
No,
get there. We're in this dense realm. I mean, many spirits that communicate with our side of life say it's like walking through thick mud to come here and communicate. That's how dense and slow this realm of existence is. So, probably angels are singing praises when someone breaks free of that conditioning and begins to realize that they're a very powerful being. They just haven't realized it, but they're in the process of doing so. So, I mean, I think the heavens probably, and I'm using that word, um, sing our praises when we can break free in this realm and begin to see the much greater reality that surrounds us.
great. That's perfect. So what I want to do is I want to invite folks that listen to this that have had a mystical experience to please write it down in the comments. We'd love to hear and a mystical experience that was transformative, changed your life, awakened your heart, made you realize there's an afterlife, whatever. But please, we want to hear from you and we want to hear your comments. So, any last closing words? I think you topped it off perfect, Gary, that, we just need to surrender, we really need to surrender. Sally, any last closing words?
I would just say that one piece of being a mystic is to be comfortable with the mystery.
Perfect. Perfect. So thank you everybody for joining us. Sally, Gary, this is a lovely discussion. I think our next one should be on the dark night of the soul because those are such important aspects to our spiritual journey. So you guys up for that discussion?
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us and we'll see you next month. Bye. Thanks for viewing this video. Please like, share, and subscribe.